Good morning, I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. Now today I'm going to do something that I haven't done for ages, and that is an album review. And I'm going to be reviewing the latest third full-length album called Gratitude by Benjamin Francis Leftwich. Now I've been a fan of Benjamin Francis Leftwich for years. I have both his other full-length records, After the Rain and Last Smoke Before the Snowstorm, on vinyl. I don't have I Am With You, which is an EP he released prior to this, but I will probably get that quite soon. You can see the difference in aesthetic between these covers and this one. This is a lot more dirty hit. But yeah, I've been a fan of his for years. His third album came out last Friday, and I just thought I'd do a little review on it. It goes without saying, these are just my opinions and my thoughts. Music reviews, I don't really like doing them very often, partly because it's so difficult to assign any sort of value to music that's objective. I don't think it's possible at all, but this is just going to be how I reacted to the album and what I think about it. So for me, it's been really interesting to follow along in his kind of musical maturing and the development of his style, starting off with stripped back indie acoustic folk music to an extent, and then the production values got a bit better. We got more percussion, more synths and other elements in his second album, After the Rain, and now we've got something that is kind of completely different from all of that, but still retains a certain integrity to the sound. It hasn't changed so much that you're not sure who the artist is anymore. It's still very much Benjamin Francis Leftwich. It's just developed and grown, and I really, really like it. And this has been going on for a little while now. All of the previous singles that were released, I mentioned them in a couple of videos before, but they weren't all songs that I listened to and immediately was like, yeah, this is great. This is classic Benjamin Francis Leftwich. Some of them, it took a while to get used to the new style and the new sound and all of these new production things, which I'll go into in a bit more depth later. And yeah, as I said, the aesthetic for his records and his singles has all drastically changed. It's classic dirty hit style. It looks very similar to the kind of stuff that the Japanese house was releasing in her earlier EPs, the kind of, you know, boxed photograph with the text underneath, all of that kind of stuff. Like Dirty Hits I find really, really interesting as a label, because they're pretty much the only label I can think of that actually have a sort of style to the label and have an identity. And that's really, really cool. But anyway, the album, very different, as I said, to his previous work. And if you're expecting more songs like Butterfly Culture and 1904, you will be disappointed. But that's fine. I personally welcome the change. We all know how frustrating it is when an artist releases the same music every single time they have a new album, and it just gets boring and very, very tiring to listen to. And it's the most heavily produced record he's ever brought out. It's very, very stylistic, and again, similar to a lot of Dirty Hits releases, it has that dirty hit vibe to it. And at times it does feel a little bit overproduced, but I like the style that it's produced in, so that wasn't a huge problem for me. Lyrically, I think it's really good. It's very introspective, and a lot of it is about Benjamin's own reflections on kind of the past few years he's had, whether that's in his own behavior or in relationships that he's engaged in. I know that this is like the most personal record that he's released. Right, so let's jump into the track by track. Track 1 is called Gratitude, the title track from the record, and it is the perfect opening song. It just, you know, like some pieces of music sound like an end credits piece of music with a film. Well, the opening track, Gratitude, sounds like the opening track for an album, and it does a really good job of kind of getting the listener prepared for what's gonna come for the rest of it, because it has examples of the heavy production, but then you're also given the familiarity of Benjamin's vocals, but they sound a lot more forward and a lot more present. There's very little reverby, multiple layers of the same line spread all around the stereo field in this record, unlike previous ones. And when that sampled vocal line first swoops in, it just sounds really, really nice. So that's track 1. Love it. Track 2 is called Look Ma. I think it was the last single that was released before the album dropped. And I've mentioned this song, I think, in Spotify playlist videos or something, but I really, 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 really like it. Begins with these sort of choppy operatic samples, and then his voice comes in, and when I talk about production, his voice is very, very well mixed in this record. Crystal clear, right at the forefront of the mix, and because he has a very whispery sort of voice, it must be really difficult to get that to sit in the mix in the way that it does in this song especially, and a lot of the breaths are either massively lowered in volume or just cut completely, which again makes it a lot more sort of present. And this one, again, you've got really interesting, complex production going on in the background. When the beat first comes in and then kind of reintroduces the second verse of the track. I just think that flows together really, really nicely, and it's just got a really nice vibe. Track 3 is called Sometimes, and this is, if I'm totally honest, the first track that I feel, just for me personally, is a little bit of a filler. And it's interesting because it's easily one of the closest to his original sound. It's, you know, very heavily acoustic guitar influence. That's kind of how it starts, and you've got this beat going on as well. It sounds very organic. It's not overproduced in the way that some of the other tracks are. It's a nice song, and it provides a bit of calm after the hectic production in Lookmar, but for me personally, it's just not one that I'm that into. And in contrast to that, track 4 is called Big Fish, and this is one that I really like. It's one of my favorites on the record, and it's interesting because I had to listen to it several times. Like when I first listened to the record, I got into London. I got a mega bus into London at like 8 o'clock in the morning. I can't even remember why, but this was on Friday, and I just wandered around London listening to his new record. And the first few times it played, I enjoyed it, but I didn't like really not get it, but I just didn't enjoy it as much as I do when I listen to it now. It took me a little bit of time to get used to the structure and used to what was going to happen in the track, but now I just think it's fucking brilliant. You got this nice ethereal atmosphere floating away when it starts, and then in the second part of the first verse, when you get these synth pads that accompany his vocals and suddenly it makes all this musical sense. That's just done really, really well, and it flows really, really nicely. And lyrically, it's interesting, the idea of, you know, a big fish in a small pond, and it's clearly talking about someone who he knows personally, who he's worried about going down a bad path and making the wrong decisions and being influenced by the wrong people. There's that one line in it that just, your friends are all fake and they lie. It's like, there's some serious shade there. But no, it's done really, really well. And I don't know, the lyrics could be about something completely different. It could all be metaphorical, who knows, I didn't write them. And then at one moment, there's like this 2-second silent drop before a kind of hip hop influenced beat comes in over the kind of the ending section of the track. And it's just so cool, and it's a nice contrast from the beginning, which was a lot more ethereal and dreamy, and then you get this, you know, beat that kind of makes you kind of nod your head around a little bit. And like I said, I had to get used to the structure, but once I did, I found so much to appreciate in that track. I think it's really, really, really good work. It's one of my favorites. Right, track 5, Tell Me You Started to Pray. Going from one of my favorites to probably my least favorite on the record, and I don't mean that in like a horrible way. I think that all of the songs on there are good. It's just this song doesn't really do anything for me. Oh gosh, I fucking hate doing reviews. It all just feels so mean and unsubstantiated when you have to say negative things about an artist you like. I don't know. It's all personal, isn't it? This is just my personal reaction to it, which will be completely different from your personal reaction to it. I did find it interesting, actually, looking on Spotify. The tracks that are my favorites are the ones with the fewest plays, and then the ones that have got the most plays tend to be the ones that I like less, which is interesting. Anyway, yeah, Tell Me You Started to Pray. It's nice. I don't think it's a bad song. It's just I didn't really gel with it. It's, again, acoustic guitar led, and then in the choruses you've got these big organic drums, and it sounds really nice, but I just don't vibe with it. Right, track 6, Luzerne. I've been there, Lake Luzerne, it's beautiful, as is this track. Now, I initially found the verse of this track a little bit static, but when the line, hair so short and wild, Audrey Hepburn style comes in, that was when it clicked, and I just flowed with the music, and it was wonderful. And one of my best friends is called Josephine, so that was nice. But yeah, it's a really, really nice song. It's one of the tracks on here that sounds like it could have easily come from After the Rain. It's kind of that kind of style, so not full organic Benjamin Francis Leftwich, but the sophomore in between, better production but retaining that sort of style Benjamin Francis Leftwich. So yeah, it's a really, really nice song. Track 7 is called I Got You. This one starts off with a stuttered vocal sample from Benjamin himself, and then this acoustic guitar kind of strumming, a kind of more traditional rhythm comes in. I actually was thinking that if you removed the additional production from it and it was just a kind of guitar track, then it sounds like it could have just come off Last Smoke Before the Snowstorm. It's got some really nice vibes in that way. And when the chorus comes in, it sounds nicely and appropriately different to the verses. You know, there's a sense of disparity and progression throughout the song, which is nice, because you don't want verses and choruses to just flow into one another without there being any obvious change. I guess, maybe. It depends who you're listening to and how well they do it. Track 8, Real Friends. This is definitely my favorite song on this album. I absolutely fucking love it. It's brilliant. One of the things I really like about it is when the vocals come in the verses especially, the vocal melody sounds different. It's a different type of melody than what Benjamin has been singing on some of the other tracks. You know, there's a thing with singers and vocal melodies that they will often end up doing fairly similar things. So if you took one vocal line from one song and another from another one and transposed them so that they were both in exactly the same key, there would be lots of kind of similarities in the nuances and the way that they move between certain notes and the intervals that they'll often use. But this one, it was just a really, really good vocal melody, and it just works really, really well. And yeah, the production on it obviously is really good. The guitar, it's got this weird tone to it that it's one of those things that some people might like it and some people might not. I really, really like it. And then you've got, again, these really well-mixed, crisp, clear vocals cutting through perfectly. And the other thing I really like in the production are these occasional moments of stuttery ambience in the guitar part at the ends of certain phrases, which just adds a certain amount of sonic interest to the track. I just bloody well love it. It's a fantastic song. Right, track 9, Blue Dress. This is another one that I initially thought I didn't like it all that much, or at least it wasn't doing very much for me. The verses especially, but when the chorus came in, it kind of changed the game a bit and it all made a bit more sense to me. And the lyrics are really good and relatable, you know, for all the times I didn't mean to say it like that, for all the times you slept while I smoked round back. That's, yeah, it's a really good track and it's definitely growing on me the more I listen to it. Right, track 10 is called Miracle Sister, and this is clearly a very, very personal song for Benjamin. Or at least I assume it's written about his sister and their relationship and the things that they've been through together. It's a very, very nice song, and it's, like I said, very personal to Benjamin. I'm not the biggest fan of that track. It doesn't do a huge amount for me, but I feel like that's one of those songs that isn't really necessarily meant for us. It's more meant for him. You know, this is something that's really personal for him, between him and his sister, and he wanted this to be part of the record, and that's good. So yeah. The penultimate song on the record is called Roisin. It is a lovely, lovely song. I think it's possibly my second favorite after Real Friends. Starts off with these really nice synth pads and a spicy bit of delay mixed in there as well. And then his vocals come in and they're, you know, heavily layered with either like a harmony engine from Antares, or maybe he just sang multiple harmonies and they're layered up, but sounds really nice. It kind of envelops you as the listener. You got his vocal there and then all of this other stuff kind of around you, and it's really, yeah, really nice to listen to. And lyrically, it's really, really lovely and kind of heartbreaking as well. You know, it's about appreciating a person you were in a relationship with, but only in hindsight. And yeah, it's just quite a heartbreaking thing to listen to, really. But a lovely track with some really nice production. And that brings us on to the final track, number 12 of the record, which is called The Mess We Make. I read in an interview that this is a very introspective track and that he's sort of referring to himself when he talks about like the mess we make. You know, in the times before rehab and when he was going through darker periods of life. I'm not 100% sure that's true, it's just speculation, I guess. But it's a lovely closer. You know, I really like it when albums finish on a quiet, much more intimate note. You know, Death Cab for Cutie are a brilliant example of a band that do this. But it starts off with just this piano note, you know, and there's a whole load of delay and reverb effects going on with it, but just a single note that starts off and then it gradually builds and his vocals come in, and it's just lovely. It's just a really, really nice way to close the album. And similarly to how Gratitude sounded like an album opener, I felt like The Mess We Make sounded like an album closer. So really nicely bookends the album as a whole. So there we go. That is Gratitude by Benjamin Francis Leftwich. And in conclusion, I would say that while there are a few moments on the record that don't work for me, on the whole, I love it. I think it's a really, really solid effort. And like I said, it's so refreshing to just be able to see so clearly the development of an artist across 3 different records. And I found when I was getting the bus back to Cardiff from London, I listened to his first 2 albums and then I listened to Gratitude after that. And the first 2 aren't identical. And that's the thing that makes it good. That's the thing that demonstrates that this is real artistic progression, because if the first 2 were just basically the same and then the third one was just completely different, it would be a lot harder to kind of get your head around it. But you can hear the development between albums 1 and 2, and then you can hear the influences from album 2 in album 3, and it's just a really, really nice maturing of his sound. And some people may not like it. They may think it's too overproduced and, you know, there's too much going on, and trying to be too edgy, I think, is something that I saw someone write about him, but it's just bollocks, just shut up. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how my perspective on this album changes, because this is one of those records that, and I love it when this happens, The first time I listen to it all the way through, I'm not just there thinking, yeah, this is great, this is great. I find albums that I immediately like every second of, from start to finish, don't last very long for me. I get bored of them quickly, and often it's because the music isn't actually that interesting or complex. So your brain subconsciously kind of can understand it really, really quickly, but then that removes any, future processing of the music. But with this, it's an interesting record. It's interestingly produced and written, and I know that the more I listen to it over time, I'll appreciate different things about different songs. And some songs that I don't necessarily like, I might start to like when I'll just notice different sonic things about it, which is just great. I love it. This is the beauty of album discovery, is why I like it when people actually release albums instead of just singles all the time, So yeah, very good album, would recommend. And I'm not going to give it like a score or a percentage or a star rating or anything like that. I kind of can't be bothered. And also, now that I make my own music, I find it really awkward doing reviews. This is the thing. I find it awkward, and I'm not going to give something a banal score as like how I would interpret its value. It just doesn't make sense to me. It'll mean different things to different people at different times. So yeah, it's a good record. I think it's a good record. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really do hope that you've enjoyed this. And I would love to hear, if you're a fan of Benjamin Francis Leftwich, or if you've heard this album, what you think about it. And, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me on anything I've said? I'd love to hear all of that. So just let me know down in the comments section there. And if anyone is interested, there are still some pre-orders available for the vinyl release of my debut EP, Her. There'll be a link down there in the description to that shop, and also to the Spotify and iTunes and whatnot for it. One of the tracks was shared on Ambient the other day. That was cool. And my Instagram is down there as well if anyone is interested. But anyway, that's enough of me rambling. Thank you for watching. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day, and I will see you very soon.